Hello everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Kyoohan Lee. I am an adjunct professor at the Grand Canyon University College of Theology in Phoenix, Arizona. The title of the paper I want to share with you today is Christ is God's Transhistorical Intention, Understanding and Applying Sensus Plenior in Today's Biblical Preaching. Based on E.D. Hirsch and K.J. Van Hooser's interpretive theories of transhistorical intention, this paper provides a theoretical basis for preaching Christ in the New Testament writers' use of the Old Testament. In explaining sensus plenior, Hirsch's implication plays a crucial role, while Van Hooser's significance advocates a valid interpretation of the transhistorical intention. Van Hooser thinks that Hirsch's transhistorical intention allows that a certain application may belong to the meaning rather than the significance. In this paper, transhistorical intention is defined as a revised explanation of implication as a shared type within the author's willed type, which originally possesses futurity, not only between the two testaments, but also between two worlds in a communicative act. The New Testament use of the Old Testament is the New Testament writers' use of Old Testament quotations, allusions, and echoes. When it comes to understanding Old Testament quotations, allusions, and echoes in the New Testament, the preacher as biblical interpreter needs to identify a valid hermeneutical bridge that answers the questions: how did Christ and the New Testament writers utilize the Old Testament? Can contemporary interpreters recapture the New Testament writers' approach? A specific hermeneutical model for interpreting the New Testament use of the Old Testament verifies the following hypothesis. The New Testament writers interpreted the Old Testament in line with the original intention of the Old Testament authors, and present-day interpreters can adequately know the meaning and significance of the Old Testament references, not only in their canonical context, but in the New Testament writers' immediate context, even though they may not understand them exhaustively. The problem of biblical intertextuality starts with the argument about later writers' ability to know former writers' authorial intentions. How did the New Testament writers discover God's intention hidden in history? How was the silent God clearly revealed to the New Testament writers? This paper deals with the understanding and homiletic application of sensus plenior. Specifically, the term sensus plenior means additional deeper meaning intended by God but not clearly intended by the human author, which is seen to exist in the words of biblical text or a group of text or even a whole book when they are studied in the light of a further revelation or a development in the understanding of revelation. In the problem of sensus plenior, the earlier biblical writers' authorial intentions, having varied significance in their immediate context, were acknowledged in the presuppositions of later biblical writers who wrote new text in their own context. Thus, later biblical writers provided either the extended meaning in the manner of sensus plenior as implication inferred from the original meaning of the earlier writers, or the new application for a new context. Nevertheless, the willed type of earlier biblical writers can be recognized by later writers in its fullest sense when the subconscious meaning has been clarified by the shared type in a later communicative act. Specifically, the problem of sensus plenior is the matter of God's divine intention, which does not contravene the intention of a human author, but rather supervenes on it. Indeed, the theology of preaching the New Testament use of the Old Testament can be stated as the unfolding the self-attesting Christ of Scripture, Luke chapter 24, verses 27 and 44. That is the unfolding God's transhistorical intention. For Christ was really acting on, in the history of progressive revelation, as the primary role of God's divine intention. The New Testament writers were able to find the intention of God more clearly, who had been hidden in history, since the God of silence confessed by the Old Testament writers was revealed through God's progressive self-revelation. The New Testament writers' interpretive approach was bequeathed to the post-apostolic Christian church for interpreting and preaching Christ from all the scriptures. The inner biblical exegesis for unfolding the meaning and significance of the New Testament use of the Old Testament can be recapitulated in the contemporary setting by unfolding the self-attesting Christ of Scripture. Hence, in preaching the New Testament writers' use of the Old Testament, the key is to present Christ as God's transhistorical intention and propose it as a homiletical model. Based on E.D. Hirsch and K.J. Van Hooser's interpretive theories of transhistorical intention, this paper provides a theoretical basis for preaching Christ in the New Testament writers' use of the Old Testament. We will discuss this topic in detail at the 2023 EHS conference. See you all in the session. Thank you.